many times, I've seen like tracking kindness, or kind of creating rules and regulations about being kind and being empathetic. But if they're not coming genuinely, or you're not really understanding yourself or having empathy for yourself, it's very hard to get to that next level. So I think it's really important to understand the subject of you before you start adding layers on top of it.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber. This episode of the podcast features a conversation with teacher, entrepreneur, author, and all-around health advocate Rupa Mehta to talk about the importance of social-emotional learning, but with a bit of a twist. Rupa is the founder of the Nalini Method and NaliniKIDS, unique and revolutionary workout regimens which combine physical and emotional exercises for optimal health. As a fitness instructor, Rupa saw firsthand that encouraging her clients to work through their emotions while working out resulted in strengthening their bodies and their minds, and she knew that kids could benefit from this approach as much as adults. So in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Rupa has created a free social-emotional curriculum for kids called Subject of Self, which aims to help students understand the who, what, and why of themselves the same way they would try to understand any subject. The idea being that social-emotional awareness comes first from an awareness of your own self. So in our conversation, Rupa is going to talk to us about the subject of self, the importance of the mind-body connection, and about how developing a solid self-knowledge is vital in order for kids to learn to regulate their emotions, understand and deal with stress, and become better equipped to navigate everything they face in life, whether it be a math exam, a great opportunity, or perhaps even a global pandemic. And like I said, Rupa has made her curriculum free for this entire school year, so parents who are navigating remote learning, hybrid learning, can work with their child just a few minutes a day on developing their social-emotional learning. All right, and now here is my conversation with Rupa. Hello, Rupa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
This is a really interesting conversation we have for parents today, and it's kind of a new topic, and we'll be talking about lots of different things that I think are very relevant for this moment in time and what's happening in the world and this kind of close-up view that so many parents are having to their kids' learning process right now. But before we get into all of that, would you just take a few minutes? I've read your formal bio, but I'd love if you could talk us through a little bit about who you are in the world and tie that into the work that you do.
Yes, I think my journey into mindfulness or social emotional learning started about 20 years ago. I started a fitness studio called Nalini Method, and where I taught adults, a killer physical workout. And I named it Nalini Method. I named it after my mom because she was the healthiest person I ever knew. And the reason wasn't because of a six-pack or because she could do a marathon. It was more that she had a buoyancy in her body and an openness about her spirit that I always looked up to. And so I really wanted to create that environment for adults because I always felt like working out in a group setting was a very vulnerable thing. And over time, I saw that my clients always said, I wish I had had this when I was younger. I wish I knew these skills, this particular skill set. And so I decided to volunteer and teach at a middle school in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. I taught 13 middle school boys a physical workout. And at the same time, I started playing around with this idea of emotional workouts, the idea that we have emotional weight and physical weight. And sometimes workouts tend to lean just toward the physicality of a person's being, even though someone might be weighed down or lifted up by the words that they use. And so I combined physical and emotional workouts and created NaliniKIDS about 10 years ago. And it led me on a journey with social emotional learning and discovering kind of how these tools really help students focus in and out of the classroom and kind of building these lifelong habits.
Such an interesting journey. I love hearing people's stories, but yours has taken such a cool organic turn. I love it.
Thank you. I mean, it's funny because when I first started out teaching fitness, I didn't think I would end up writing children's books or getting into emotional weight more so than kind of physical weight, but they are so connected and interlinked and to us naturally. We can't separate our body from our heart. So it kind of makes sense that they go together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so interesting. So I actually want to look at social emotional learning just as a concept. SEL, social emotional learning, these are words that we often just say and read all the time. And I don't know if we actually all have a good sense of what that actually means. So could you define that for us?
Sure. Oh gosh, I could answer this in so many different ways. I think I have the same feeling you have where it's like there's so much, is it self-regulation? Is it management? Is it self-control? I think simplicity. Simply, I say it's the subject of you. How do you overcome barriers in your life to connecting to yourself and others? And do you have the tools in place to understand the subject of yourself? One thing that is an organizing principle for me when I think of social emotional learning is so often we ask kids what they want to be when they grow up or a goal that's ahead of them. And I think social emotional learning should be, if it isn't already, asking students and our children, who are you now and what can you teach us? And just that simple question can lead to so many answers in student voice and coping mechanisms and their own perspective, which I think is the key to studying you.
I love that question. Who are you now and what can you teach us? So what happens when you ask a kid that question versus what do you want to be when you grow up?
Well, you can get such great answers. I mean, you can get things like, I am a person who loves to take care of my cats and dogs. I can teach you how to take care of your animals. I'm a person who's lost right now. I'm in high school, but I have faith in this. This is a new organization I heard about. I want to be an activist. It just opens up this idea for mutual dialogue and power sharing, which I think is so important, and the authenticity of the conversation just increases.
And by power sharing, you mean that respectful communication that we're communicating with kids more as peers, right? Not as this authoritative presence in their life.
Exactly. I mean, I think everyone is a teacher in their own way, whether you're young or old, a teacher or a student, your ability to have life experiences that you want to share and you want to have an audience that listens, that can happen in any conversation. So I think power sharing when it comes to social emotional learning is really important. And I see that as a void sometimes in the field, that there are programs that might be more preachy, like, hey, this is how a good character is, or this is how happiness looks like, and it doesn't feel authentic to the recipient. And so I think making room for student voice and sharing that power dynamic is really important for successful social emotional learning.
Mm-hmm. So you talk about studying yourself. So what do you mean when you say that? And I love, even as you answer that, if you can think about specifically differently wired kids and kids who may have particularly lagging social emotional skill development.
Well, and I love your terminology. I love all the terminology you've used, but when I think of differently wired, I think of kind of applying that concept to we're all wired to connect differently, but we are all wired to connect. It's an innate thing that we have. And so I think that creating physical and emotional tools in our toolbox is important. So when I say studying you, I kind of separate that out a little bit, that usually why you're lacking focus in learning or being in a moment is a physical factor, like you might just be hungry or tired or not comfortable, or an emotional factor. You might feel like you don't have the tools. You might feel that you're bullied or you're overwhelmed. And so coming up with workouts or regimens that can help you work through those emotions so you can be physically in the moment and emotionally in the moment is the point of studying yourself. So how are you wired to connect physically and emotionally? And understanding that will help you learn better in general.
So how do you do that? To me, and I will be honest, this is not my area of expertise, the specific work that you do, but it feels breakthrough to me. The curriculum that you've developed and what you are creating for educators and now for families. So talk us through a little bit about your subject of self curriculum. We'll be right back after this quick break. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls. And with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free, there are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, and that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Synbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off.
I'll give you an example of a physical workout. So instead of calling workouts like jump squats or jumping jacks, we would call that power or energy. And so the idea is to make a mind-body connection feel super practical. So we have, in the subject of self-curriculum, we have physical workouts that are a compilation of 3-minute workout videos done with various professional fitness instructors, but they're all one-word workouts. So you have the happiness workout, the perseverance workout, the worry workout, the anxiety workout. So you're able to see, how do these emotions physically manifest in my body and how can I move? And especially for differently wired children, I think it's incredibly beneficial, kind of this idea of if you can name it, you can tame it. And seeing how like, oh, my hands are sweaty. My face is getting red. Oh, I want to do the angry workout, and just making that connection. No judgment on the emotion or the feeling. It's more about how does that energy move within my body? And so that's how the physical workouts work. The emotional workouts are kind of all over the place in terms of options. We have drawing prompts. We have written discussion prompts, but I'll give you an example from elementary school. So we'll tell a story of an ant and an elephant. They're called Mookie and Gorbit. These are like a couple of our famous characters. Mookie is an ant that's way down by life. He's best friends with a Gorbit, the elephant that's bright, buoyant, and vibrant. And they both weigh 20,000 pounds, this ant and this elephant. And they're trying to figure out, how is it possible? So how can an ant and an elephant both weigh the same but look so different? So they go on a journey and they discover Gorbit the elephant needs to learn how to move, and Mookie the ant needs to learn how to eat lighter words in his morning cereal. And so the students in the program end up drawing what these characters could look like. Mookie, what does he look like? What are the words he's using? What does his day look like? What colors does he like? And so you're able to give that student voice to your children and see, like, how does Mookie look like for them? And it's a safe way to access emotions because you're talking about these kind of third party characters. So there's the drawing that comes in, the discussion prompts, and obviously this kind of lifelong lesson that's embedded in these stories. On a high school level, you'll see something like a worksheet about authority, the idea of where do your views of authority come from? So we'll give like word box, different prompts to encourage students to think, did my views of authority come from my parents, from the news, from my own dynamic with my sibling? And so we ask these thought-provoking questions, which are also aligned with illustration and discussion prompts, that there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a structure and an outlet to dive deeper into the subject of themselves.
I want to talk about both the emotional and the physical workouts a little more. I watched some of the physical workouts. I thought it was such a cool concept. And I just want to be sure I understand the idea of that mind-body connection on a personal level. That is the work I am really focusing on right now, just trying to get more in tune with what's happening with my body so I can better show up to my child, and I think for so many of us as parents, right, in this moment, we're struggling with our own overwhelm or this ambiguous loss that I've been reading about. So that mind-body connection, I'm really starting to understand the power of understanding what's happening in your body and how that's connected to emotions. So when we're teaching this to kids, and then you've got these workouts, and I watched a couple of them, is it the idea that doing the workout is a kind of a physical manifestation that they would do to just make that connection deeper, or is it a way to actually process that emotion? Can you explain that a little more deeply for me?
Yes. I think it could be both. I think fundamentally underneath it is that it's supposed to be fun. It's just kind of an easy way to get into talking about emotions. The idea that if you can, let's say we were to meet right now, you and me in person, and just do like a workout together, we're definitely going to have more fruitful conversations after. I'd be like, oh my goodness, that was a hard push-up or a hard jumping jack. And just that movement of body helps you move your mind. So I think kind of the baseline for the workout is that. And then on top of that, if you're able to isolate the emotion and how it's moving in your body to help you kind of for focus and help you concentrate on how that feeling outside of movement manifests, I think is important. So let's say you're doing the angry workout and it's like a chair pose and you're isolated and you're sitting down in this deep squat and your thighs are burning. Okay, now outside of that, let's say you get angry in general somewhere else outside of this workout setting. What are the clues that are coming up for you? What could you do? It's a kind of giving yourself a coping mechanism outside of even the workout. And I think that's when a real mind-body connection really flourishes.
And then let's talk about the emotional workouts as well. I had a chance to look at some of those too, and I really loved the way that you're talking about. I looked at ones for high school students because I'm raising one of those, and just the way that you are encouraging this inquiry about topics that aren't necessarily, that can be more ambiguous or things that are very topical right now in the world. So can you talk more about that, even how that works for what we're experiencing, what so many kids are grappling to understand as we move through this time of such division in our society, and there's racial unrest, and it's a very complicated time, I think, to be a kid.
I agree with you. And I think that going back to what I was saying earlier in terms of that question, like, who are you now and what can you teach us? Like, every single person on the planet right now is having a very unique experience. So to the best of our ability, if we can set up structures or curriculum in place that allows for that voice to be, take the time to marinate and make sure that before amplifying your voice, that you actually understand your voice. And that's kind of the core of the emotional curriculum. Like, Is your view of authority or globalization, is it fixed? Is it movable? How did it come about? And just asking these very simple questions about abstract concepts can actually make them feel more manageable. Because I think the more you understand your feeling and the roots of it, the better you are able to understand a bad piece of news that you might see, or a disheartening piece of information you might hear, or better able to handle a conversation with someone who doesn't agree with you.
Well, and what I like about this too is so often I think a lot of us hear social emotional learning and they're thinking about reading social cues and yes, the emotional regulation piece, but this idea of really truly understanding how you move through the world and the things that you feel deeply about, or, you know, what are your views on these? These are things that I imagine just have great repercussions for a child's future development.
I think so. And I think it taps into your more authentic voice. So many times, I've seen like tracking kindness, or kind of creating rules and regulations about being kind and being empathetic. But if they're not coming genuinely, or you're not really understanding yourself or having empathy for yourself, it's very hard to get to that next level. So I think it's really important to understand the subject of you before you start adding layers on top of it. Just to kind of share a quick tangent here, one of my biggest partnerships for this curriculum is with the Department of Education in New York City. And my initial partnership with them started with the STEM department, the science, technology, engineering, math, where you wouldn't typically think of like social emotional learning kind of going in, but it was their big focus. And I think that many times when you think of STEM or you think of kind of learning, you think of multidisciplinary things. And I think when you think of social emotional learning, you have to apply that same mindset. How do you make social emotional learning feel hands-on? And it's only going to feel hands-on when you feel like it reflects your voice. Even as a teacher, parents are struggling with this and teachers are struggling with this. How do I talk about biases or viewpoints or authority or globalization or innovation without getting my own biases in the way? How can you do that? And that's what the curriculum hopes to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, going back to what you said before of that power sharing, this is a curriculum that respects the individual experience as opposed to a one-size-fits-all solution.
And I think that when you do that, it's like you can't even predict where the conversation is going to go. And I think giving students the opportunity to teach you and then impact what the learning is going to be for the next day, the next week, the next year, I think is really important. I think, to a certain extent, had we had this type of understanding more generally across the world, then I think we would be better equipped to handle something like this, like the pandemic, because I think our ability to navigate our own routines and our own selves would have increased. And I think it could be very simple. It only requires like 10 minutes a day or creating a routine. It doesn't have to feel like, oh my God, I have to do this humongous training or I have to dedicate years to this. It's quite simply like asking someone, how are you doing? Can you draw a self-portrait of yourself? Could you draw a self-portrait of the United States? What are some questions that would inspire you to do that? And that it's as simple as that, this curriculum, but it creates such thought-provoking conversation.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything. Because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
So you have created this curriculum, Subject of Self, and you've made it available for parents to download for this school year, correct?
Yes.
So maybe give us a little more details for parents who are listening, who are interested in engaging with the curriculum, what they could expect. You know, you mentioned it could be just 10 minutes a day, but tell us a little bit more about the curriculum itself and how they would actually use it with their kids.
Sure. So the curriculum, we have it laid out by 4 different grade bands. Kindergarten through 2nd grade is early elementary, late elementary, 3 to 5, middle school, 6 to 8, and high school, 9 to 12. And we've laid out 35 weeks of curriculum. And how it starts and the way we suggest you would start is, let's say on a Monday, you have a handout that you can either download and print, or you could use virtually online, whatever your kind of your back end looks like. And it's a handout that is, your children would be given prompts and they spend the whole week filling it out. And they have 5 daily prompts and 5 daily emotional and physical workouts that help them complete this weekly worksheet. And so we have 35 weeks for each grade band. There's a training so once you sign up, it's a free curriculum. Once you sign up, it's about a 15-minute training and you'll learn how to navigate the site. It's really user-friendly, easy to access. And you don't have to go in chronological order. We suggest you do. But if you have to dip out for a week, you have something come up, we know that parents need that flexibility. And it requires just such a little commitment, as little as 10 minutes a day. The physical workouts take up about 3 to 4 minutes of time. And then the emotional workout could take up about 5 minutes of time. And then you can, end or close however you may see fit.
So you've really done all the work for us. It sounds like this is kind of one-stop shopping for social emotional learning that parents can easily incorporate into their routine.
That was the goal. The goal was to kind of take that thinking out so that you could really enjoy, as a parent, possibly filling out these worksheets alongside your children and enjoy the conversation and not have to worry about what's next. We even have a checkbox, above each worksheet. So you know which one is done, where you can pick up where you left off. It's really easy to use. That is for sure.
That's awesome. And I'm wondering what the response from kids is, just curious to know how it's been received, if you've tested it with kids and how they like it.
Well, I've tested the recent curriculum with students over the past, 3 months. And, just a backstory, we've been working on the foundation of this curriculum for over 10 years now. So we've tested it in so many different settings, whether they're homeschool settings, public school settings, private school settings. And I'd say the number one thing I hear from students is just that it's fun. They actually enjoy getting to learn about themselves. They feel like physically working out is accessible. They feel like they have coping mechanisms in place. I had a student who was on the autism spectrum who voiced to his teacher and to our organization that felt like he had a filing cabinet in his brain and that he knew where to file certain things when they came up, and he had a go-to physical workout. That's huge. He felt like he was able to understand his emotions. He was looking forward to middle school as a result and to making friends because he hadn't experienced that before. Putting characters or stories or their own drawings around these emotions makes a huge difference for both children and adults. And I think that at least for parents, you'll be able to understand your children on even another level once you see their take on their artistry, and how they, gravitate to the one words in the workouts, how they want to discuss things. If you put them in the role of teacher, you'll enjoy being the student.
That's so cool. So anything else that you want to share with our listeners, something that they, maybe the best way they can get started right now, but any other, I guess, insights or thoughts about how parents can support their kids' social emotional learning and development?
I think it's as simple as just dedicating a little bit of time every day. If you have somehow as a parent taught your child to brush their teeth a couple minutes a day, you can teach something like this. It feels overwhelming and there's so much going on in the world, but you could just ask a thoughtful question, give room for an answer, and it only takes a couple minutes and moments of the day, and it could really change the trajectory of your home and the emotional well-being of your family.
That's great. So tell listeners then where they can find this curriculum and any other places they can engage to dive deeper.
Sure. So to sign up for the free curriculum, go to subjectofself.org and you can sign up and you'll immediately get a training video that's about, like I said, 15 minutes, and you can start right away and choose the grade band you want. And if you want to find out more about our organization in general and all the kind of various programs we offer, you can check that out at NaliniKIDS.org. It's NaliniKIDS.org.
Awesome. And listeners, as always, I will have links in the show notes page for this. And I did, as I said, get to interact with the curriculum, and it's very easy to navigate. And I really appreciate, as I'm sure all parents do, the fact that the lessons are short and sweet. Even just that the training video is like 15 minutes is probably the most that any parent has in terms of bandwidth right now. So I love its accessibility.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And I think that in terms of setting your children up to learn, whether they are learning virtually or otherwise, I think this is great to be done as a morning routine. If I were to give that added suggestion, just start your morning like this. I know a lot of people do morning announcements or Pledge of Allegiance or whatever they do in their school, and making a pledge to yourself to be able to navigate this funny world we're in right now, I think could really go a long way.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. I'm a big fan of intentionally starting the day. For a long time, my son and I used to do something called the Miracle Morning, which was a little routine. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So Rupa, thank you so much for creating this and putting this out in the world. Again, I think it's really unique and so needed, now more than ever, to give our kids these tools to better understand themselves, but also your generosity in sharing this with parents everywhere so that we can actively play that role. So thank you so much for explaining it all to us today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on your podcast, and I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. For the show notes for this episode, visit tiltparenting.com/podcast and search for this conversation. If you like what you heard on today's episode, I would be grateful if you could take a minute to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating or a review. Thank you so much for helping us stay visible so people who would benefit from the show can easily find it. If you want to support the show and help me cover the cost of production, please consider joining my Patreon campaign. To support the show, just visit patreon.com/tiltparenting. Lastly, if you aren't already part of the online community at Tilt, I invite you to sign up at tiltparenting.com on the box in the bottom where it says Join the Revolution. Every Thursday, I send out a short email with a quick note from me, a link to that week's podcast episode, and links to 5 stories from the news that week that are relevant to parents like us. Again, you can sign up and learn more about Tilt at www.tiltparenting.com.
Hey, are you a parent of a teenager? Are you feeling overwhelmed about how to be what they need while also holding limits and boundaries that keep them safe? Are you tired of conversations that negate how messy this season of parenting is? Well, I've got you. My name is Casey O'Rourke. I am a positive discipline trainer, parent coach, and the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. Every week, I come to you with an interview digging into tough topics with experts I trust and solo shows that go deep into the personal growth and mindset needed to raise teens in a way that grows them into confident, capable young people. I am not afraid of getting real about the intersection of conscious parenting and the teen years, while also bringing in vulnerability, humor, and lightness. I'm walking the path with you and honored to serve. Listen to Joyful Courage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts.